Hello ladies, gentlemen, and my NB friends, and welcome back to the Kelde channel. I'm your host Kelde, and do you love Pokemon? I love Pokemon. I think everyone on planet Earth has at least heard of Pokemon, and I'm assuming most people, if not everybody, fan or not, knows the famous tagline or at least heard it. What's that tagline? Gotta catch 'em all. What are we catching? We're catching Pokemon. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of the games, to be fair. And in the games, the catching mechanics have stayed mostly the same throughout the years. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there is a lot of fun to be had while catching all of the different types of critters and filling out the in-game Pokédex encyclopedia. Despite the iconic in-battle catching system that has been a mainstay since the series' debut, there have been a few games that have tried some tweaking to the system to varying results. This brings us to today's subject, Pokemon Legends Arceus. Pokemon Legends Arceus was a new single-player open-world semi-spinoff title that was released for the Switch in 2022. The game introduced a ton of new features and mechanics that were entirely unique to it, making it a truly remarkable entry into the series. This includes the catching mechanics. The classic in-battle catching is still here, but you can also capture Pokemon in the open world outside of battle now. I was playing a bit of Legends Arceus and just stopped for a moment to think, how does the catching in this game actually work? Believe it or not, there are several factors that go into catching Pokemon in the regular mainline games. In Legends Arceus, however, there are almost twice as many factors and ways to manipulate the odds to be in your favor. From in-game rank, to what type of ball you use, to even if you force feed the Pokemon in field, there are things unique to this game that just isn't seen elsewhere in the series. Do you care? Well, I hope, because today we're going to explore just how Legends Arceus evolved Pokemon catching. Before we can discuss how each of the new mechanics and features impact catching, we'll first need to understand how catching works and what these features are. What's the catch rate formula? You're probably wondering. I'm so very glad you asked, because this is the catch rate formula. A equals parenthetical 0.75 times rate plus outbreak close parenthetical plus 30 times parenthetical of rank plus parenthetical 3 times HP max minus 2 times HP current over 3 times HP max, times status, times ball, times behavior, times backstrike, times berry, close parenthetical, close parenthetical. In essence, every Pokemon has their own catch rate, which is represented via the rate variable in the equation. The higher the rate, the better your odds at catching the Pokemon. Essentially, your goal as a player and the elite Pokemon trainer is to do all you can to manipulate the variables so that way your odds of successfully catching the critter improves. This formula perfectly breaks down all of the variables that we will need to study for this video. We know what the rate variable is, and it's been a staple throughout the years, thus we won't need to worry about that too much today. The only thing worth mentioning about it though is that Legends Arceus did increase a lot of the Pokemon's base catch rates, so that way it'd be reasonable to catch them in the overworld. Moving on from the catch rate though, we have the following variables to look at. Outbreak, rank, HP max, HP current, status, ball, behavior, backstrike, and berry. My goal for this video is to break down Legends Arceus' catching mechanics and explain how it adapts the formula for the series. It's no surprise to anyone that this experimental entry into the series changed some things, but how does it work? We have 10 total factors to break down, one of which we already kinda did. I think we can start by breaking down each individual component on its own, how it's supposed to work in theory, and then once we go through all 9 remaining variables, and theorize on them I guess, we can then talk about how it all works in practice, through my own personal experience of playing this game for 3 years since it released. Let's move left to right in this equation and start our invigorating variable video venture by discussing outbreaks. Mass outbreaks are random events that will occur in one of the areas before departure. When active somewhere on the map, the game will spawn in a few waves of specific, predetermined Pokemon in an area. There are also massive mass outbreaks, yeah, that's what they're called, which are very similar, only it's a bunch of different waves happening simultaneously across the whole map, and it only lasts for a limited period of time. If the Pokemon you're trying to catch is part of either type of outbreak, then the variable is set to 10 in the catch rate equation. Rank is determined by, well, your in-game rank. The player has a galaxy rank that is determined by how much progress you make in the Pokédex and how many Pokemon you catch in the field. The rank goes up to a maximum of 10 and impacts a few things. Important to us today though is the catching modifier. The rank variable is actually its own equation that varies based on another variable. Math! The rank equation is rank equals rank player minus rank Poké plus 1. The rank player is the player's galaxy rank. The rank Poke is, believe it or not, another equation of level minus 1 over 10 plus 1. To explain with an example, if you are catching a level 43 Swinub, you take the level 43, subtract 1, thus making it 42. Divide 42 by 10, leaving you with 4.2. Add 1, giving you 5.2. Then go back to our original variables formula, take the player's galaxy rank of 9, subtract the rank Poke variable of 5.2 in this example, and add 1, giving you a final rank variable number of 4.8, and add that to the final equation. I hope that made sense. Next up, we have HP max and HP current. These are both very obvious in that they refer to the total HP of whatever Pokemon you are trying to catch. The manner in which they are used, however, is quite interesting. At least to a weirdo like me. The subpart of the base catch formula is 3 times HP max minus 2 times HP current over 3 times HP max. If our hypothetical Swinub from earlier has, let's say, 160 health max, we get it down to about 58 HP, then the variables together in that scenario would equal out to about 0.75834. I believe you would take the 3 by 160, getting you 480, take 2 by 58, getting 116, take 480, subtract 116, and get 364. Then take that 364, divided by our original 480, getting you, say it with me now, 0.75834. Which, while being a decimal and can harm the rest of our catching equation, it's good to note that using these same numbers, hell, using any number in place of the HP max, and should we deal no damage, then the value would be 0.3334 or 0.33 repeated, which would be even more of a detriment to the total. In short, if you're going to engage in battle, it's always best to deal as much damage as possible if you plan on taking your victim home with you. Oh thank God, we are now at easier values. Next up is status. If the Pokemon has a status condition in battle, then the status variable becomes 2. Anyways, yeah, that's status. Next up is the ball variable. Our times of simplicity are over, unfortunately. Well, actually, the balls and their modifiers are quite simple in theory. It's just hard to properly explain because there's no math or imaginary Swinubs. So basically, every ball has their own catch modifier. The base Pokeball, Great Ball, and Ultra Balls have modifiers of 0.75, 1.5, and 2.25 respectively. The Heavy, Leaden, and Gigaton Balls all have modifiers of 1, 1.75, and 2.5 respectively. Finally, the Feather, Wing, and Jet Balls all have values of 0.5, 1.25, and 2 respectively. So depending on which of these balls you use, you get a different value to be represented by the ball variable in the original catch formula. Here's the catch. The Heavy, Leaden, Gigaton, Feather, Wing, and Jet Balls all have boosted values depending on how they're used. If the Heavy Ball lineage is used on an unsuspecting Pokemon, then their values are increased by 0.25. So if you use a Leaden Ball normally, the value is 1.75, but if it's used on an unaware Pokemon, its value becomes 2. The Feather Ball lineage are boosted when you're trying to catch flying Pokemon. This doesn't mean the type, but rather the Pokemon that are literally flying around, and these are few and far between. Their values are increased by 0.75 each, so a Feather Ball goes from 0.5 to 1.25. Like I said, no imaginary Swinubs. Though a Swinub flying across the sky would be pretty majestic. The behavior variable is determined based on what the Pokemon is doing or acting like in the overworld. Depending on the action, the game hits your formula with a different number. Let's run through each one. I bothered to write them down, and you're going to listen. Default status gives 2. Docile behavior gives 2. Timid behavior gives 1. Aggressive behavior gives 1. If they're stunned, the value becomes 3. If they're currently escaping, it becomes 1. Cautious behavior gives 2. If they're eating, it becomes 2.5. If they're eating cake specifically, it becomes 4. If they're sleeping, it becomes 4. If they're resting, it's 2.5. That was quick, simple, and painless. And yeah, that's all the behaviors. If you initiate a battle with a backstrike or throw a Pokeball at the Pokemon from behind, it gives a value of 1.75 for the backstrike variable. And finally, the berry variable is set to 1.3, but only if the Pokemon is eating a raspberry. The raspberry is listed in-game as making it easier to catch Pokemon, thus it has its own variable in the formula. Now that we know all the variables in the catch formula, we need to know what to look for and what the game wants us to do to better our odds at catching Pokemon. So how does this all come together in practice? Okay, so you want to know why Pokemon catching works so well? Because of RNG. Whoa, hold on now, Kira. You hate RNG. Okay, but hear me out. If you're playing a regular Pokemon game and you had to do a few specific things to ensure you catch your target every time without fail, then it'd just be repetitive and unengaging. Knowing that there's a chance to snag a Pokemon without dealing damage, or even failing a few times on a legendary to finally catch them after a hard-fought battle, it all adds to the experience. You mean that there's a quick ball I can use to counterbalance the typical catch formula variables? Dang, that's neat. Are you out of Ultra Balls and trying to catch a rare encounter? It's so nice when it pays off. How does RNG translate into Legends Arceus' catching mechanics? Well, it means that you can still fail. This means that you are able to gather, purchase, and craft all the tools necessary to improve your odds, but it isn't a guarantee. The failed attempts are a lot more engaging as well, since Pokemon have their own personalities and can react to you differently when you're trying to snag them. They might try to run away, they might not even notice, or they might become aggressive and try to attack you, which, if there's multiple, can become insanely difficult to pacify and survive. So RNG does add to the experience in what I'd consider to be positive ways. All of that said though, most of the variables in the equation aren't really worth exploring. Variables like rank, outbreak, and behavior either aren't able to be manipulated by the player or are a consequence of just playing the game. Then you have HP max, HP current, and status, which are all battle-based variables, so you'll just have to engage with the Pokemon properly to manipulate these values. This doesn't mean they're pointless, it's just that most catching takes place out of battle, thus these variables don't impact much. To put simply, if you're going to try to distract a Pokemon with anything, it's best that you use the Raspberry as it has its own variable and it also boosts the value of their behavior. The ideal catching scenario would be someone tossing a Raspberry, sneaking behind the Pokemon while they're eating, and then hitting the unsuspecting Pokemon with a heavy ball variant in the back. That way you're getting values for the ball, behavior, berry, and backstrike variables, all of which are the easiest to manipulate. Earlier, and by earlier I mean like a minute ago, I said that the behavior variable was a consequence of playing the game, and it is. You can distract the Pokemon to manipulate it, but a lot of the values are just based on whatever Pokemon you're dealing with. To further on behavior, there are items in the game used for stunning Pokemon. You can throw items like balls of mud, spoiled apricorns, sticky globs, etc. at a Pokemon and it'll stun them. Based on our information, that would give the behavior variable a value of 3, making it easier to catch than the default. This all has a secondary effect though, where if a Pokemon is aggressive, it becomes impossible to catch outside of battle. If you manage to hit the Pokemon with one of these items, it will stun them and make them catchable. This is really neat and can lead to some fun scenarios of dodging, weaving, and stunning. Alternatively, you could just be strolling through an area and throwing Ultra Balls at Pokemon and catching a few. This is where we discover a potential flaw with the catching mechanics of this game. Whether it's a natural spawn in the open area or part of an outbreak, the Pokemon spawn in groups. Most of the time, your odds of catching at least one of the bunch by throwing Pokeballs at an entire group is quite likely. This more or less undoes the entire point of giving us 18 billion ways of manipulating the values to benefit us and increase our odds to achieve our goal of catching them all. But I also kinda get it. Like, you don't want to make the game's catching too terribly difficult for 3 key reasons. 1. If you make it so each variable has a stronger influence over catching to the point of it being required, then you take away a bit from the RNG magic of the rudimentary Pokemon catching. 2. The game is about catching Pokemon and filling the Pokédex. The game is the first in being this remarkable open world experience with passive catching mechanics. You don't want to make the central goal and point of the game to be overly difficult or hard to understand. And 3. Pokemon is one of the largest game franchises. You don't want to make a game that's too difficult or confusing and risk ostracizing a part of your audience. Personally, I think the catching of Legends Arceus is very interesting to look into. I think it's cool that there are several ways of manipulating the values and working out how best to catch something. That said, I tend to just hide in the bushes, or throw a smoke bomb, and toss an Ultra Ball or Gigaton Balls at an unsuspecting Pokemon. I'll clear the group and then move on. That is, in my time of playing this game since it released, the best way of going about things. All of that being stated, there are 2 types of encounters that will always be fun to me. The first being catching an alpha Pokemon on your first ball and managing to just snag the beast without the trials and tribulations that such an ordeal would typically contain. The second scenario is you being found out by a group of aggro Pokemon that you have to dodge, weave, and then pacify using overworld nullifying items like sticky globs or spoiled apricots, stunning the aggressive Pokemon and then quickly throwing out balls and catching them. It's fun, dangerous, and it feels so great when you're able to pull it off. What does all of this mean, and does it really matter? Truthfully, I think it means that I'm capable of writing down numbers and explaining simple math equations in a video format. Just aside, I think that it's clear that Pokemon has been evolving since its arrival on the Switch. Hell, every game adds a new and interesting feature or mechanic, dating all the way back to Gen 2 building off of Gen 1. I think Legends Arceus is a great game, one of my favorite Pokemon games, and the catching mechanics have always been interesting to me as there are a lot of values to consider, and because the gameplay loop is so different compared to the regular entries in the series. I think it's all very interesting to make a video about, but I don't think a lot of it translates to gameplay very well. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please leave a like. If you're new to the channel and my style intrigues you in any way, might I suggest that you consider checking out some of my recent videos or subscribing so you don't miss future ones. Also, check out my Blue Sky for Blue Sky things and Discord server in the description. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching and have a great one. Thank you. Bye-bye.